Hello, my friend, and welcome to TFU News and Views. I am your host, Anthony Brucali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.INFO, the website, the toy archive, the social media, this podcast, and Transformers University podcast, and everything else involved with TFU.INFO. I really hope you enjoyed our Toy Fair coverage in February. We've got a lot of great stuff up on the Twitter if you haven't seen it, at TFU_info. And today, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about a book that I received from the fine folks at Viz Media to review, and that is Transformers: A Visual History by Jim Sorenson. Many of you know Jim Sorenson for his work on the ARC Archives and the Allspark Almanac, and for his website, Disciples of Boltax. Jim has been a fixture in the Transformers fan community probably longer than many. He was there when I started. So Jim is certainly a wealth of Transformers knowledge, and this book is everything you think it would be. It is lovingly curated and crafted, and I'm going to gush about this book a lot. So just strap in for that. Now, way back in, I guess it was the late 90s, might have been the year 2000, when I was working on building the toy archive for TFU.INFO, I was building my collection at the same time, but there were times where I would purchase toys on eBay or at BotCon to fill gaps in what I didn't have photos for. And one of those was the Micromaster Air Patrol, the Autobot Air Patrol. And so I had won this eBay auction for the Air Patrol, for the 4 little Micromaster figures, Treadbolt and Blazemaster and the other 2. And the seller was located in New York, in Queens, where I grew up and then was living at the time. And he said, free delivery if you want to come pick them up. And so he gave me his address, and I went over and picked them up, and it was Jim Sorenson. I had recognized him because we had hung out a handful of times at some BotCons, late at night, hanging out in the lobby, doing what 20-year-olds do, is just, talk Transformers and be silly and put Action Master figures in provocative poses. But so, fun fact, the Air Patrol, as seen on TFU.INFO, the 4 figures there from the Autobot Air Patrol did belong to Jim Sorenson at one point. And Jim, as I mentioned, has been in this fandom for a long time and is what I would call someone who knows Transformers. See, I like to consider myself knowledgeable, but I am always learning about Transformers. It's why I do Transformers University, because there is just so much I haven't touched as a fan. So much I haven't explored. And as I explore it, I bring you along for the ride. And that is part of what I do with Transformers University. And the other part is the stuff I already know and the stuff I get to re-experience and reinterpret through older eyes and bring some history of my own to it, and of our guests and how they bring their own memories to it. So just a little memory there of Jim. But Jim is definitely one of those people that knows Transformers. There's only so many of those people in the world. It's the Chris McFeelys, the Jim Sorensons, the Ben Yees, and a handful of others. This book is amazing. It's huge. It's over 400 pages. You will need multiple sittings, not just to go through it, but to absorb it and go back through it. It is impossible to take it all in one sitting. I have not been able to do it. I've been through the book probably 5 or 6 times now, and there is no way I've done any one of those times in one sitting. It covers all eras of Transformers from 1984 up through last year in 2019. Some things are better represented than others. Some of that is probably due to production timing. For example, Cyberverse is in there, but it's really only through season 1. On the other hand, War for Cybertron Siege is in there, and the Bumblebee movie is in there. So there are things, and all of the recent video games are in there. So there is a lot in this book represented. I mean, I think I saw everything from the original BotCon from the later FunPub BotCons. I'm not entirely sure if there was anything in there from the OTFCC era, but I've been through the book a bunch of times and I haven't absorbed it all. So it may be in there. Personally, I think the Wreckers image, the BotCon Wreckers, actually, I guess that was three FunPub era BotCon. That would be one I would like to see in a book like this. So that said, I think the only thing I didn't find in here was Kiss players, and that's kind of like one of those eras that a lot of fans want to forget. But this book, it covers a whole bunch of things, and there's basically 5 chapters in here: packaging, comics, animation, video games, and movies. There's also some subsections, some mini sections that break up the bigger sections, but it starts out with packaging, and this is a great place for this book to start. It makes this book an amazing companion piece to Jim's previous work with IDW Publishing, Transformers Legacy, which covers the box art from Generation 1 all the way through Generation 2, and a whole bunch of unused and pre-Transformers stuff as well. Now, if you have that book, this is a great companion to that. The packaging actually makes up the first quarter of the book. So it's over 100 pages of packaging art covering from G1. So there's some repeat stuff from the Legacy book. There's some repeat stuff from the Legacy book throughout, but that's okay. Covering G1 through G2, Beast Wars. They skipped Beast Machines on the packaging art because the toys were photoed on the packaging. But Japan, Europe, it really does run the gamut all the way up through War for Cybertron Siege. And it's just so nice to see this packaging on its own. The one critique I would have had on the packaging section is there are certain bits of packaging that don't get saved and don't necessarily get remembered. And that's not to say like packaged image of carded figures, but maybe the card backs unbubbled, so with no bubble on them. That would have been cool to see. Some of the inserts, the cardboard inserts for boxed figures, particularly with the Beast Wars Neo and Beast Wars Second era, where they had things printed on them, backgrounds printed on them, much like you see now with the current Cyberverse figures from Target, the Quintessons and the Sharkticons, where they have backgrounds, much like Studio Series and the backgrounds that are for those. It would have been nice to see those represented, but to trade those off for these beautiful full-color images from the packaging, it's certainly a very, very minor complaint. Next section is comics, and it features iconic covers and interior art ranging from Marvel US, Marvel UK, Studio Ox in Japan, Dreamwave, IDW, the Collectors Club. There's even this great little subsection on homages, and not just one type, but 2 different types of homages. They have homages that reference other bits of pop culture from Transformers comic covers. So Transformers comic covers referencing other comics like X-Force #1 and X-Men Giant Size #1, and or music covers, the Sgt. Pepper cover from More Than Meets the Eye. These are all in there, but there's also then artwork in the homages section of later Transformers iterations referencing earlier Transformers iterations, usually Transformers the movie and one of the posters that goes with it, but also the Marvel Comics #1 is usually in there. There's a lot of really neat stuff in that section, and it makes for a great topic to talk about. And once you get through packaging and comics, you're already about halfway through the book, and I can tell you it takes a long time to go through those portions. In fact, there's some text in the book. There's some introduction pages for each section. I have not read any of it, and I've been through the book a whole bunch of times because the art is just so fascinating, so well laid out and presented. I cannot speak more highly of how this book covers the Transformers history visually without shortchanging really any one particular series of Transformers. The next section, animation, has all sorts of great things: character models, backgrounds, sketches for various characters, screen captures from various series throughout the Transformers history. It has posters. It has the poster, the one I love. I grew up with it on the back of my door, and I think my bedroom door. And I think I left it up there. I left it up there until I was about 14 or 15. And when I felt I had kind of outgrown toys and Transformers, I still didn't have the heart to take it down. I covered it with another poster and left it there so I could look at it every so often. And that is the GM Egglestone poster. Just Google it. It's an iconic thing of Optimus Prime with his gun in the air, and there's various other characters flying out from behind him, and there's a Decepticon symbol on the top and the volcano behind him. But not only do they have this beautiful piece of art printed in there, there's also Egglestone's sketches from before he finished the art and before he came up with the final piece. And they're two different takes on eventually what would become kind of an amalgamation of those two in the final version. Additionally, in the art section for the CGI shows, there are renders of characters. There are renders from various prints and lithographs, a couple from the BotCon, 3H BotCon era of the Beast Wars cast that they had given out at one of the conventions. And then before we get to the next section, there is a subsection on crossovers. And I get it that the subsections kind of break up the bigger sections, but this really belonged over in the comics section because it's mostly comic book based. It's artwork of various Transformers crossovers through the years. And if you've been keeping up with Transformers University, back in episode 80, which we just put out, I talk about Only Human, which was probably the first big and one of the few on-screen crossovers where Transformers crosses over with G.I. Joe, and the character Old Snake is the villain. And coming up in episode 82, I'm going to talk about the G.I. Joe Transformers Marvel Comics crossover, which is really the first big full-on Transformers crossover. But in here, and I didn't even think about it really until I was looking through this book, the cover for Transformers #3 is in here with Spider-Man swinging around Megatron. And that's really like the first Transformers crossover. And there's been dozens of properties that have crossed over with Transformers since. This really only covers comic book art and other Hasbro properties. Again, that might be a rights issue to some extent. But it would have been kind of cool to see some of the toy crossovers shown in here, like the Marvel and the Star Wars figures that have been crossed over before, maybe even Animorphs. But I mean, that's really nitpicking the book, which I'm trying not to do because the book is really so good. From here, it goes to video games. There's a lot of game art, cover art, in-game renders going all the way back to the Commodore 64 days and the Super Famicom stuff, all the way through the current mobile games of Forged to Fight and Earth Wars. There's some great art from Transformers Devastation, which was, I guess, the last console game, right? There's screen captures. There's all sorts of great things here. And that leads us to the next subsection, which is miscellanea. And this has some great promo art, some great concept art, and some art from inside of Transformers books. I'm kind of surprised that some of the coloring book stuff wasn't in here because of the big names that had worked on that late in their career, such as Steve Ditko, or the Earl Norem stuff from the Big Looker books. But regardless, there's still some beautiful, beautiful stuff in here. Finally, that takes you, and this is now the final 60 plus pages of the book. So you're already over 300 pages into this book, which is bigger at this point than that Legacy book that I mentioned previously. And we start seeing things from the Michael Bay live action films all the way through Travis Knight's Bumblebee. A lot of these concepts are being shown for the first time. Michael Bay and Paramount were very, very tight with those concept images. So a lot of those aren't out there, and they're in this book. And it goes in order, all 5 films for Michael Bay, and then into the Bumblebee movie. But I think a lot of that stuff might still be under NDA. A lot of that stuff might be Paramount kind of holding back on that because they're just screen captures and promo images from the Bumblebee film. Now, overall, this is, if you're even a casual Transformers fan, this is really a must purchase. This will, if you don't buy a lot of stuff, and I know I have fans of friends who don't buy a lot of stuff, this is one of those things that you really should pick up. This book kind of fills a great void. It kind of is a great way to educate yourself if you're not familiar with anything more than 1 or 2 series. And it's just so well done. I'm so glad. I really hope that Jim Sorenson and Viz Media continue this partnership. I know I would love to see him continue the Legacy book with Viz, and maybe do some more obscure kinds of stuff, or continue up after G2 and go into Beast Wars and Beast Machines. And through the ages, maybe even from say Beast Wars right before the Unicron trilogy, and they do a whole book on the Unicron trilogy box art, because I feel like the Legacy book was so good that it really does need to continue on, because that artwork, look, the G1 artwork as a kid, like I said, I kept this stuff on my wall. I would cut it off the boxes and put it on my wall. Now I got this really great, beautiful book with some of the more iconic pieces in full. A lot of those back of the box collages that were cropped for various purposes depending on the size of the box. These are shown in full in this book. It's amazing. And you could pick up this book right now on Amazon, and I'll include links in the show notes and in the description to Amazon. This book right now is 30% off on Amazon, special edition and the regular edition. So for $60 some odd, you can get it in the special edition, which is normally $100, and the regular edition is in the $30 range, which is normally closer to $70. So by far worth every penny, even if you paid full price for it. Right now, Amazon has really got these marked down. So if you want to check them out, follow the links in the show notes, follow the links in the description, and go pick up a copy today. Moreover, with Viz Media, I love that if this is how they're going to treat Transformers as a property, I am all for it. They're doing this. They're doing the manga books. The next 3 books they're releasing are all Japanese manga translated into English officially. We've covered those on some of the episodes of Transformers University, episode 28, episode 60, and episode 65. So be sure to check those out, because I'm hoping to review the first manga book real soon. Hopefully Viz carries on with Jim Sorenson in this relationship and builds some more of this Transformers archive, because I think a lot of this stuff should be archived. It's part of why I built my site. But getting that stuff digitized or in some sort of digital form, which Jim seems to have done many times over now, is perfect for this kind of prestige hardcover books. And I would love to see these come out 2 or 3 times a year. I think that would be great for the Transformers fandom. I think you could build a collector's market around these things, and I really hope Viz continues with presenting Transformers artwork in its entirety. So with that, we will wrap things up for this edition of TFU News and Views. Now, if you're only familiar with TFU News and Views, please go and check out our other podcast, Transformers University. Episode 80 just dropped this week. We cover, we're starting the back end of season 3 of the original series. Additionally, on Patreon, I just dropped a Patreon exclusive episode talking about the future of Commander class figures in the Generations line. What characters fit that bill? Well, if you're at the $3 and up level on our Patreon, patreon.com/TFU.INFO, you can find out that episode exclusive to our Patreon students. Now, if you want to get in touch with me, other than the Patreon, the best way to do it is on Twitter, at TFU_info. Tell me what you think of Jim's book. Do you like it? Do you love it? You can't possibly hate it, because there's nothing to hate about it. But share with me your favorite artwork from this book, your favorite page from this book. I want to know what you like from this book. And if you haven't bought it, check the show notes for this episode. I'll have all the information there, all the links there for you to go out and pick it up right now while it's still on sale on Amazon as of this recording. Other ways you can keep up with me and the show: Facebook.com/TFU.INFO, Instagram.com/TFU.INFO, YouTube.com/TFU.INFO. Follow, subscribe, ring the bell, do whatever it is you have to do to be kept up to date with what I bring to you on TFU.INFO. Of course, Toy Archive is available at www.tfu.info, world's longest running transforming toy archive. And that will wrap this episode up. Until next time, I am your host, Anthony Bricali, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.INFO. See ya.